This is Patrick Roth, Senior Support Tech for E1 Business Solutions. Today we're going to look at a fairly common thing we see with SmartConnect 2018 and 21 maps, where the usual complaint is I'm running integration and the record count seems doubled than what I expected. And usually that's associated with the record count's doubled and most of them are successes, but then most of the other ones give errors. Is usually how you see it. Depends on what kind of integration you're set up with. So if I open up this particular map, this is a SQL data source query going to a GP destination. And it could be any destination, but you see it a lot in GP for whatever reason. So in this case, the SQL query source is select top 10 from RM00101. So we're just going to grab the records. So the RM00101 is the customer table. And we notice that the data source key field is set to Dexro ID. The Dexro ID is an identity column. I could have used the customer ID here because that's also a primary key on the table. So we have 10 records. And if I preview, I get 10 records. And I'm going to the GP destination and going to create customer. I think how you end up with this issue typically is someone opens up the company's window to see where it's going to, because if you have multiple companies, obviously you want to make sure that the destination is correct. And they'll look and they'll say, oh, that's funny. There is no destination selected. I need to fix that. So we'll mark it going to Fabricam because that's where I want to go. And so then they'll run the map. And the first thing we notice is I do have a record count of 20. And we'll say, that's funny. I know for a fact there's only 10 records in my source file. Now they're all running. I'm not getting any errors. Unlike the other scenario that I gave you, is oftentimes you'll see that. But 20 source fields, 20 successes, but we're still puzzled why it's 20 when I clearly only have 10 records in my source query. And the reason why is this. So if I was going to do a destination, right, it takes your source records, and then based on what your key fields are, determines how many record count that's going to be. Again, ours was 10. And when you do this, so if I would pick 2 companies, so this could happen with 2 companies. If I have 2 companies marked, it would send the 10 rows of data to the 620 company, and then it would also send the same 10 rows of data to the 220 company. Now in this particular case, and that'd be fine. I would be able to create these 10 customers as is in both companies. That would be fine, and I would expect to see 20 record count, because again, 10 for one and 10 for the other one. But the thing that people don't always catch is this define button. So I'm going to mark the 6 rabbits here, and we're just going to go 2. Now, when you use define code, the idea of the define code is that I don't have to mark a destination as a checkbox. Instead, some of my data from the source file. So a lot of times what you see is you'd have a field called, like, say, enter ID. So maybe if I did want to create customers in my multiple databases, I'd have a column called enter ID or company or, whatever. And this has the GP intercompany ID. So I could have in my source file a column called company, and I could put in SIX20 and TWO20, and then it would go to the right destination. In my case, I just had it completely hard-coded to the 620 company, or excuse me, the 220 company. So in this case, what happens is it's exactly the same as if I check both checkboxes. It'll look at the define script and said, yes, these are all going to the 220 company. Great. And then it will look at the checkbox and it says, yes, these are all going to the 220 company, or whichever checkbox I have. And thus my record count is doubled. Now, one thing, and so the solution to that then is if you're using a define code, you almost certainly don't ever unmark the checkbox. And again, that's where I think people get into this problem, is that they open up the destination don't see a destination, don't think about the defining code, and instead they mark it because typically you have it marked, right? And so they do. So there's a variation I've run across once, is that so in order to fix this problem, if I didn't want to use the defined company, I would just use clear and default to the string.empty, or more than likely you want to use the defined company, and the solution to that problem would be is to unmark the checkbox and continue to use the code. So that's almost certainly how you want to do it. But one of the things you also can see, rarely, but you also see it, is if you change this. Now, remember I said that it's looking for the words return string.empty. If your destination is anything other than return string.empty, then SmartConnect will say, oh, he has a destination. Now, it doesn't evaluate on the fly, so it just assumes that this is all going to work out, but it does it. So in this case, if I put a comment here, empty string, for example, and I validate it, in the end, my code is still returning string.empty. But if I run the map again with just the Fabricam destination, I'll see it a little bit differently. In that I still see the record count 20. Again, I expect that because I do have a destination. And then I also have a company marked, the 220 company marked. So there's my 10 records. Now, as I'm running this, we'll notice like, that's weird. The record count was 20. My error count is blank. Not 0, not 10, but blank, and then the success count of 10. So what this meant was that for the blank one, in the end, it returned blank, and so SmartConnect said, oh, this is not a valid destination. It didn't return an invalid destination, but it knew that blank was not a value that was successful. So what happened was it ran the companies that we saw to the successful ones, and then for the unsuccessful ones that were returning blank, it just said skip. So it skipped the 10 records there. So it was a little bit odd error, but still a variation of the same problem either way. The solution to that is to make sure that you open up your companies then, and if we don't want to use the define script, press the clear and make sure that it's return string.empty and not string empty with spaces, not leading spaces, comments, anything. It always should be return string.empty. And so now when I run it, the first thing we note is record count of 10, and then we're going to have 10 successes. So the key points would be is make sure that if you're using the define code, that you probably don't have any other companies marked as destination. Maybe you do want it that way, but I don't know that I've ever run into that scenario. And then the other part is make sure that if you're using a define code, that it actually returns a valid value. And if you don't want to use it, make sure you press the clear button so that it returns the default, so we don't get the fake record counts. Doesn't hurt anything in that case, but it just seems odd and make you wonder what's going on.